Listen, I have friends of mine who are on the left, and they do not like Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form. Can't stand him. They get mad at me for trying to defend or explain what he's doing. They went real quick from "this is a coup" to "this is ethnic cleansing." By the way, it's not healthy if you believe everybody on the other side is a Nazi. And once you've gone down that road, it's really hard to come back from. Is it Godwin's law? The first one to rush to the Nazis loses the argument. The left lost the argument a long time ago. They've lost their minds over Donald Trump. It's kind of wild to see the rush by the left to not just vilify the people they don't like, but to vilify them in the most awful ways, to try to marginalize them. And by the way, those of us on the right, we don't really care at this point. We're so used to the name calling by the left. We're all racist, bigots, homophobes, misogynists, everything the left says. Now we're Nazis. It's just one more insult by the left. And they are simply a bunch of neurotic, mentally ill people who need a lot of prayer. They don't like not being in control. And part of the problem, too, is that they're setting their hair on fire over absolutely everything. Donald Trump just merely breathing is enough to trigger them. You know, it's interestingly enough. So the guy, and he's a perfectly fine guy. He's just totally screwed up in the head by the Trump stuff. The guy who on social media says that I'm a propagandist for the Fuhrer and a traitor and a enemy. He's actually online has more than once lamented the bullet missed Donald Trump. I mean, they would love to have him dead if they could get rid of him. They were upset at the assassin's bad aim, or Donald Trump's luck, or God Almighty protect him. It's just kind of wild that we've gotten to this point where if the left isn't winning, they think the world is going to end. And now the Central Intelligence Agency has offered buyouts to its entire workforce. This is from the Wall Street Journal. The CIA appeared to be the first intelligence agency to tell its employees that they can quit their jobs and receive about 8 months of pay and benefits as part of Trump's push to downsize the federal government. The offer last month made to most civilian federal agencies exempted some categories of federal workers, including those with national security roles. The agency is also freezing the hiring of job seekers already given a conditional offer, an aide to CIA Director John Ratcliffe said. Some are likely to be rescinded if the applicants don't have the right background for the agency's new roles, which also include Trump's trade war and undermining China, the aide said. Across government agencies, overall interest in the deferred resignation offer appears to be low. Career coaches focused on the federal workforce say, citing conversations with more than 100 people. Many people have questions about whether they are legally able to take another job during the payout period or whether they can return to government under a future administration, these people said. There's no statutory authority that I can see for the president making this offer, says Senator Tim Kaine, who represents tens of thousands of federal workers, and said no constituents have told him they're taking the deal. Doing so presents risk, he says. The administration immediately knows you don't want to work for me. They'll find some other way to get rid of you. You should not raise your hand. Trump administration officials have said the offers are also meant to signal to those who oppose Trump's agenda to find work elsewhere. Ratcliffe told the White House to extend the same buyout package to the CIA, the aide said, believing it would pave the way for a more aggressive spy agency. The CIA spokeswoman said the move was part of an effort to infuse the agency with renewed energy. I know a little bit about the CIA. There are some really good people, some of whom, interestingly enough, you know what their cover story is? They work for USAID. I'm sorry, I should laugh about that, but it's really funny. In comes Donald Trump with a wrecking ball, lays off everybody at USAID, tells them, pack up, come home. Do you know that the CIA uses USAID as a cover to go into countries with spies? It's actually very funny. So a number of the USAID people who will be packing up abroad and coming home are actually spies for the CIA. There are some really good people at the CIA. I have in my life known a number of people who worked for the CIA. I've had relatives who we have wild family stories, in particular about one. My parents, when I was a young kid, they were friends with an elderly man who was a sugar tramp. He would go around the world helping third world countries develop sugar cane. Turns out he was actually in the CIA. It's a fascinating entity. But I also know people who work there currently. And I can tell you that a lot of the analysts who have come into the CIA over the last number of years have been academically trained in American institutions, and they don't want to get their hands dirty. They're very academic. We are behind in our need to spy in China. The CIA has kind of bungled the ball when it comes to dealing with China. We're very good with Russia. And we rely on Israel for a lot of the Middle East. The CIA needs a shakeup. To quote Jack Nicholson's Joker, the CIA needs an enema. The CIA has also fallen behind in the Western Hemisphere. And we got to have a better, sharper agency of people not indoctrinated in American universities told that we need systemic racism reforms in this country. The CIA actually needs to be shaken up. It's interesting to me that the left is melting down about the CIA and buyouts of the CIA. You would think that the left would be really fine with shuttering the CIA, except they're not, because so many entities that are tied to the CIA are, again, left-wing, non-governmental organizations. This is becoming a pattern. Side note, this problem existed in the Bush administration, and there was a guy in the Bush administration who raised alarm bells about this thing. You would all know his name is Dick Cheney. He was Vice President of the United States. And Cheney worked very, very hard to bypass the outside NGOs and make sure that funding wasn't getting to them. And so it's kind of wild now to see that Donald Trump and Elon Musk and J.D. Vance and others are advancing against the left-wing non-governmental organizations that Dick Cheney himself went to war against, and Cheney was supporting Kamala Harris. I mean, Dick Cheney internally was one of the people who raised all sorts of red flags about the CIA and the left and the cohabitation with outside left-wing non-governmental organizations, among others. It's been a problem for a very long time. And they undermined the Bush administration. They certainly undermined Donald Trump. Remember, what was it? Vidman was tied in with intelligence agencies and caused the first impeachment of Donald Trump in the Ukraine matter. The CIA does need reform. But there's another side of this, too. It's the lighting your hair on fire stuff from the left. There's too much going on. They can't keep up. They cannot keep up. They're rushing, and in rushing, they're getting upset about everything. And if you get upset about everything, people get exhausted. The base, the rage machine itself loses steam, but also Americans can't keep up. You're mad about this, you're mad about that, you're mad about everything. You're mad about foreign aid being cut. Americans want foreign aid cut. You have no overall message. They went from coup to ethnic cleansing. God knows what they'll be on next week. Next week, they'll be on World War III, and Trump really is der Führer. They'll be speaking in German accents to mock him. They've lost their minds. They've lost their minds. They have no coherent agenda to stop Donald Trump. Right now, it is throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. If they're upset about the CIA, most Americans, I think, get buyouts. By the way, most Americans in major corporate entities go through a period of layoffs and buyouts. I have multiple friends in multiple industries right now who are getting offers to retire early, buy out their employment contracts. This happens in the private sector. I'm sorry, but there are a lot of Americans in the private sector who are looking at the public employees whining about this right now. Voluntary buyouts. You don't even have to do it. You do not have to engage. You don't have to take the offer. You don't have to do it. The reason Trump is doing it is because he understands that within the administration, there are a lot of progressives who have thought they can stay and they can block him. But I got to think that if the left is so enraged about every little thing, some of these people are going to be so exhausted. They're like, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I'm gone. And they take the buyout. We don't know how many people will. What I do know, though, is that we got to reform government agencies, including the CIA. We got to reform the FBI. We have to reform the NSA, the DIA. We got to reform the Pentagon. We got to reform all these agencies. They have coasted on inertia. Things in motion tend to stay in motion unless a force is applied against them. Donald Trump is that force. Donald Trump is the counterforce to inertia. Things at rest tend to stay at rest until a force is applied. Donald Trump is the force, not the Star Wars force. He's the force to either slow things down or speed things up. He's the president of the United States. The CIA is in the executive branch. You know, if Congress wanted to, Congress could restructure these things, but Congress has never done so. Congress is lazy. Congress doesn't like to legislate. That's not actually a bad thing. Maybe this will be a wake-up call. Instead, you know what's going to happen in 4 years? The Democrats are going to do the exact same thing and wait for Republicans to whine. I won't be whining. I'll be telling Republicans, you set the precedent. They get to do it too. Both sides could disarm, but after years and years of left-wing bullying and left-wing incursions and left-wing funding of NGOs, the Republicans aren't going to stop. They've got at least 2 years, thanks to Republican control of Congress, to keep doing this with very little check on their power other than some judges. And it is very, 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 very remarkable that no federal judges, Obama or Biden-appointed judges, have rushed to enjoin all this action. Why? Because so much of it is perfectly permissible, because the president is the executive power in the United States. And guess where these divisions are? Within the executive branch. The executive power shall be placed in a president of the United States. Not in an administrative state, but a president. He gets to do this stuff. The reason the Democrats have not done what Donald Trump is doing is because the Democrats, working through both Republican and Democratic administrations for years, have set up the administrative state the way they wanted it to preserve their power when they're out of power. And so much of the screaming and bellyaching right now is because Donald Trump is breaking up their machine of power that keeps them in power even when they're not in the White House. That's why they're upset. That's why they're upset.